the sport. I think it's the experience.
Oh, yeah, okay. Been there, done that kind of a thing.
Okay.
I, I
Yeah.
I this year in another month I turned 75. And so when I look at life, um, I have less years left in my life than I've had on planet Earth so far. So the the most fascinating part about this was the journey and all the adventures that I had. And as most of you know, I retired in 2000, so 26 years ago. And because of what I built in the 90s from 19, well, it wasn't just the 90s. It came from a lot of experience in many different arenas. But the key was the understanding how it works and what to do. It was as simple as that. It took me till I was 39 to figure that one out. So from the time I left school, which was a complete waste of time, until 39, I was a lost sheep in the sense of trying to really get a handle on life and living and what to do and how it worked. Um, but once I figured it out, then man, it was like you get the instructor manual for a car and you learn how to drive. And once you can drive, the world's your oyster. You can drive anywhere you want. And some people go fast, some people go slow, and there's everything in between. So right now, what I enjoy the most is watching other people have success, which is an interesting viewpoint of, and I try and pass on the knowledge that I have so that because the keys, it's all knowledge. It's everything is knowledge. You learn, I'm I go into the kitchen and I just don't have the knowledge that a skilled chef has to make a good meal. So my meals are, sometimes they're not as good as they should be. So my wife and I have a great discussion about who's going to cook and who's not. So anyway, there you go. Little, I'll probably edit out that whole thing. It has nothing to do with anything. But here we go. So I was when I started to edit last week's video, I thought, man, what went down last week was truly remarkable in so many different ways. And so when I edited the video, took out a couple of things, I said, man, this is a good video. I think this is going to go somewhere. I didn't realize how far it would go and how quickly it would go, but it's done really well, and there's a lot of very valuable lessons. Now, with that being said, there was one area that I think we could do a lot more with and clarify and really hone in on. And it's, I guess the topic would be prospecting. It would be cultivating relationships. It would be farming. It would be developing your raw materials. And it really came for me in my first book, Vested Interest, where the analogy that I use to talk about our business, it's like a factory. And in the front door of the factory comes the raw materials. And there was a show on television. It was how it was made, I think was the name of the show, and it would take you to all kinds of different places of how things were made. How cans were made, how cars were made, how whatever the topic that they picked that week, and they do a documentary on how it was made, and it was absolutely fascinating to see the intricacies and the steps and the ideas, and it's all the same stuff in the sense it's a recipe. and you need
All right.
ingredients, and then it's a matter of how you mix the ingredients at what point, and using heat and steam and so on and so forth. I was just watching a documentary on how in Asia how they treat garbage and how they use garbage to make roads and all kinds of wonderful things, create energy, and it's done on a daily basis, and there's no trash by the end of the day. Everything is reused. And it's absolutely fascinating when you look at how something's put together. And once you see it, then it's a matter of application. And it's a matter of do. We talked about this, and that was the reason for the subproduct list was, part of your job as being a CEO of your business is to evaluate what's going on and what's working and what's not, what's there, what should be there, what's missing, what needs to be corrected, what needs to be put in, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle up here and understood, then you don't really know what you're looking for. And you don't really know what you're looking at. And if you don't have any means of collecting information to evaluate, then you're kind of walking down a road blindly and hoping, it's the old throw something up in the wall and hope it sticks. So what was really fascinating, and again, when I looked at, how what he said about the development, especially with his first guy, that he met him about a year ago in 2025 at a networking event, and they were both speakers. So there was a commonality between the two of them. They were both speakers. They developed a communication between the two of them. Whatever happened, but it took probably a good few months for that relationship to develop, and then more time after that until he got involved with the business and there was that opportunity to discuss the big picture and the dream and et cetera, et cetera. Because all the other things are pretty much universal in the sense of why people do things and what makes them tick and so on and so forth. And the big dream and going after something worthwhile and having a big purpose and so on and so forth. And what was and again it goes back to the very beginning of Nikken in North America. And when it first came across from North America, it had just come from Asia. It was doing business in South America, it was doing business in Portugal, it was doing business in Japan. They had a team in the Olympics. They had all kinds of different bells and whistles that we didn't have, and they used a totally different marketing strategy than we used. And when they came to the United States, the idea and the part of the philosophy and the big picture was the world. And at the same time, there was this concept of wellness, which was being born and started to get traction and had legs. And it was part of we want to teach the world how to be, healthy, wealthy, and wise kind of a thing. Well, we've made a mess of that one, but in all kinds of directions, let me tell you. It's where we're at right now is not surprising, but in some parts it's scary, and other parts it's opportunistic, and it's a matter of, what's the niche, and of course what the niche is, in my opinion, right now is for you to have your home-based business because you can control that. And that's what's really important. Now, the key to that control, obviously, is understanding what's necessary and what's needed to make it work. And so that comes back to this idea of prospecting and cultivating and working on your raw materials because the fundamental of our business, like everybody that's here on this call, are people. So that's the raw material. People are the raw material. People are the ingredients. People are the magic bullet. People are everything that's important. And again, you have a business and your front door is open to those people. Now, how do you get them in? What it becomes, what do you need to do? Well, again, it's that development of that relationship. And what was fascinating about what he said about that was, it's not just, well, how's the weather and what's going on and how you doing? He gets into some deeper questions. Now, in going that route is skill. Okay, and skill comes from practice and experience. And so in the beginning for somebody, that might be a little bit advanced in the sense of, you know, asking somebody, why are you in that problem? Why can't you fix this? Those kind of questions, because that sometimes is what makes sense. But what I found was you can start on a very superficial social chit chat, and and over time you can get into those conversations, and you can then, once you understand how somebody ticks, and once you understand how they communicate, and once you understand what they do, and so on and so forth. And again, the interesting thing, and I've talked about this forever and a day, was it's all about the questions. It's communication, asking questions, listening, getting the answer, and then feeding that back. And so there was a book, if you can find it, it was called Big League Sales. The author of the book was a gentleman by the name of Les Dane. I think originals of that book are like $25,000 or $30,000. They're hard to find. You might be able to find one in the library, whatever, but he really nailed down the characteristics of communicating and selling and identifying the character based on what they said, how they acted, what they did, so on and so forth. But it all boiled down to what Robert said and what we've all said about, it's the why. It comes down to that why. Well, what's why? Well, why really is want, and in the sense of, you set the goal. Well, again, if I go back to the beginning, I wanted $8,000 a month. That's what I wanted. Why did I want that? Well, that was the amount necessary to provide for my family. Period. It wasn't to get rich or anything like that. That was just the cost of living. So the idea was my why was I wanted to do something that would generate that kind of revenue so that I had peace of mind at home. And I think that the surveys are showing right now what's missing, or what the biggest issues out there are right now, is that peace of mind is lacking, where people are questioning what they do and where they're going and how stable are things and what's going to happen, and is their job safe, and do they have enough money, and can they save it? All of these issues. And again, most of them are in a position where they're not in control. And by that, what I mean by they're not in control, they're working for somebody else that's in control. And one of the things I learned really early on was I went to work for somebody and I looked at what they did and I said, well, I can do that. Now, I didn't know how they did it, but I saw what they did, and bossing people around, giving them orders, telling them what to do. I said, I can do that. I can tell somebody to go pick up that pallet. And I could, one of my first jobs was at a company called Arctic Ice. And I made ice in Winnipeg. I went to a building, an office, and it was, I think it was like 15 degrees. So I had to wear a parka and long underwear, in the middle of summer when it's 75 degrees, because it was a college job. And but I made ice. And so then, and of course, Winnipeg had Eskimos, so I used to say that I could sell ice to Eskimos, which I did, and because they would buy it from stores. But when I looked at what he did, I would look at the machine and I would look at, I was curious about how things worked and why they worked and what made them work. And, they take water and they put it in a vat and they freeze it and they take these big chunks of ice and they put it in a machine that has a cruncher, claws, and it breaks up the ice into little cubicles. And then it has a chute and you open the chute and the cubicles fall out and they put them in a bag. And then you have a staple gun, you staple a bag and you put that on a pallet and that was the job. And I said, well, I can do that. But then I had to figure out, well, what do I need to do that? Well, I need some money and I need a facility and so no, I'm not going to do that. I got to figure something else that I could do because that's, at that time was above my pay grade. But the idea was I started to look at this and in that sense. And then the next profession that I got into was with sales, with Mutual of Omaha and life insurance. And I would probably say if you wanted a background in learning how to sell, become a life insurance agent and go work for a big company and learn the ropes. And we started out knocking on doors. And now you've a lot of you've heard me tell this story, but I would go to farmhouses door to door because that was the program, and all farms had dogs, and I hated dogs, and I had this little sports car, and every time I drove into a farm, sometimes the dogs were bigger than my car. So I would drive in one side and out the other side and go to the next farm until there was no dog, and which was limiting. And now, if we look at it, I developed a consideration that prevented me from communicating to somebody who could be a potential customer and would want the services that I had to offer. So, what's the bottom line then? The bottom line is you're the only one that can stop you from being successful. You are the only one that can stop you from being successful. I can't stop you from being successful. Your neighbor can't stop you from being successful because your success depends on what you do. So I realized this in a number of lessons that it was what I did. And I watched this guy in our office, and what he did was he cultivated his prospects. He didn't just go in there and wham bam and try and sell him a contract. He went in and explained, I work in this whole area. I go around, I check up on people, whatever his story was. He brought coffee, he brought lunches. He'd go out and drive in the field. He'd wear boots and get muddy and so on and so forth. So what was he doing? Well, what he was doing was he was creating and developing a relationship of trust and a relationship where the affinity, the degree of likingness with one another would go up, the ability to communicate would go up, and the reality of what they talk about would go up. Therefore, the understanding about what was going on would go up. And so I didn't see that then, but that's what he did. Where he got that from, I don't know. And then I went into the next area, and again, I started to see more of this. And then I got into network marketing in 1975. And I got in there and I had a group that I got into, and I was able to talk to this group because we had an affinity and there was a reality and lots of communication, created understanding, and I got the group to join, but I couldn't get the group to get others to join. So my career in Amway, which was where I started, just went up and down, fizzled in about 60 days with a garage full of product. Now, valuable lessons in the sense of making mistakes, doing the wrong things, being able to look at it, lick your wounds, stand up, do it again, so on and so forth. But the message of what was required and how it worked really started to come through. And I went through 12 other network marketing companies from 1976 through till 1980, maybe 87. And they were all the same. Not the companies were the same, but the methods, the idea, the raw materials, the ingredients, the approach, the way things were done were all the same. in the sense of, okay, you've got a factory. Your factory is you and your business, and you open the doors, and then you take that person through processes. You take that person through systems. You take that person through awareness, understanding, education, whatever you want to call it, whatever that process is. But you take them from raw meat, for lack of a better term, to a well-educated, sophisticated person. And what I saw was people would come in on the street, off the street, and they would come out the other end multimillionaires. And I was saying to myself, wow. And when Jim Jantz was he was a real revolutionary character in Amway, developed a lot of systems, was a school teacher. And when said to me, Dave, how'd you like to own a Coca-Cola machine on every corner of every street, and every time somebody bought a Coke, you made a nickel as the idea, it was like, oh my God, what a concept. What an idea. Now, that was the big picture. And we heard, we heard that in that, meeting last week, the big picture. And then the idea was, well, how do I make that work? What do I have to do? And it became the rest of the quest after that was just trying to learn and figure out and didn't have the right people to work with. Well, I didn't find, or I didn't communicate, or I didn't ask questions, just like here you all are. And one of the things that both Michael and I have said in what we say is get a mentor. Get somebody to work with that'll push you, that'll help you, that'll guide you, and be willing to be led so that you learn and do the work. But if you don't do the work while you're being led, then it's a waste of time. But if you do the work, and that's all I did was again, let's look at the big picture here. What I saw, Nikan was a very successful man. The owner of the company made it big. He had this simple idea. He developed this concept, and he said to me, based on the opportunity, Dave, you can become a distributor and do the same thing I did. I said, great. Now, he didn't say that to me personally, but that's basically what was happening. And as an independent distributor, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you have to follow the rules and regulations, but there's no rule and regulation saying who you talk to. There's no rule or regulation who you sponsor. There's no rule or regulation saying how much time you work. There's no rule or regulation saying how hard you work. None of that stuff. There's no rule or regulation saying, restricting you from learning everything you can learn, reading every book you can possibly learn, working with anybody you could possibly work with, finding 10 mentors, spending a gazillion, whatever. There are no rules against that. So it became then, and again, this is going back to what Robert said about the prospecting and cultivating. See, one of your jobs as a network marketer is to cultivate your raw materials as if you were a farmer. Or let's say you're the manufacturer of aluminum cans for Coca-Cola. What's your raw material? Aluminum. So what do you constantly have to be working on? Aluminum. Now, I I do volunteer work for another organization, and they have their own publishing and their own production house and their own all their machinery, printing, and so on and so forth. And they were going to bring out a new release directed specifically at children on an education level, and they had to make these books. And so, in order to prepare to make the books, they bought all the paper that was available in the United States in the category that they needed for the books ahead of time because that was an ingredient that they needed to have in order to produce what they needed to produce. Now, think about this for a second. Most companies would sit there and say, well, what do you think we're going to sell? And well, we'll buy some paper and we'll get it started and we'll see where it goes. Where and again, what we're this is a concept, an idea, and part of your thinking process. As when I got up in the morning building this business, I had my picture of my goal, what I wanted on the wall, and if there was nobody in that spot, it was a blank circle. And I would look at that, and my first thought to my mind was, I got to find somebody to fit in that circle. Now, what did that mean to me? Well, that meant I needed to find somebody that wants to play and that I can help build. But below that picture and that circle, there were a whole bunch of other circles. So it wasn't just to fit that person in, but was to help develop what was below because I understood the value of everybody on that team in terms of remuneration and income to me, which then made the goal worthwhile. So I wanted to find the right person. So sometimes I'd run into people and they took months to develop. But again, that it's like that's the investment. You see, you want to think big and think in futures. Well, what does that mean, think big and think in futures? Well, you want to think that person's a diamond in 2 years. Now figure out the economics of that and work it backwards and then work it forwards. I've been a Royal Diamond for, I don't know, th almost 30 years. I didn't think about that, but I thought about what it would be like to be a Royal Diamond. I didn't understand the future as much as I thought I should understand. So then in the sense of cultivating, the sense of prospecting, and what was so valuable in what he said is it's like, now you're not going to go in there and try and sell them the world yet, but you want to cultivate them to see if you can sell them the world in the future. And again, part of the way I operated on this was I wanted people to buy, I didn't want to sell. So I wanted to create an environment and an understanding that they'd buy what I had to offer. I didn't have to sell them because I found out that if you're not self-determined and willing on your own ground to do this business, it doesn't work because I can't force you to do it. I mean, that's that simple. You know, I can't say, okay, go sell $5,000 worth of product this month, guys. Come on, let's go. And intimidation doesn't work, and none of that stuff works. It's got to be it's self-determined, self-motivated, self-generated based on you wanting, based on a couple of things. One, understanding what to do, and then applying that because you want the result of what you do. I wanted to make $8,000 a month so I could pay my bills. Once I started to see that I could make that, then my goals changed. And then I kept raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar, raising the bar. And it wasn't any different than the first month. The only thing that was different is I just had talking to more people, which, okay, there you go. Now, in the book Vested Interest, and you had that copy, you can go back through the thread and download it and read it. The idea was is that you want to understand all the basic processes of your business and how the lines work and how it feeds to the others. So you talk to somebody and then you just write down what's next. And then so the next thing is maybe you want to get an ABC. Okay, that we heard that on the call. So you do an ABC. So from you contacting somebody to doing an ABC, there's a line. And then what happens in the ABC? Well, at the ABC, the expert has the story and gets the motivation. And if he does his job right, then they're motivated to go to the next step. What's the next step? Maybe sign up, buy some product, start building the business, start talking to people, whatever the case may be. Now, all of that stuff that's going on there is going to be determined by the conversations you're having, the questions you're asking. So the only thing I can utilize in this is there are two sides to this coin. One is the ones that say yes and want to do something, and the other is the ones that don't do anything. And I've experienced both, where people said, "Yeah, I would love to do this," and yeah, okay, I'll sign up. Yeah, I'll get a demo kit. I'll do this. I'll do that, and then 30 days later, nah, I don't know. They just don't have the wherewithal, or they didn't have the time, or something went wrong. So the other aspect of this is you have to be prepared with this. So you want to have resources in excess. So if the line is from raw public to you communicating to an ABC, and you're not talking to anybody in the raw public, then how the heck is that line going to feed the other parts? It's not. Do you follow where I'm coming from here and the area that I'm trying? So what I'm saying to you is your thought process of understanding the lines, understanding the connections, understanding the activities, and understanding the results. What I had to learn is, well, what was my capability? How much work did I have to do? Now there's guys out there that are gazillionaires. There's guys out there that, got all kinds of stuff. I didn't do that. I didn't get there. But what I got out of life and living was very acceptable, very enjoyable. I had a ball, love it, and I'm very satisfied with what happened. So who's the judge? Me. I'm the judge. And I feel great. I love what I'm doing. I love where I'm going, and I love the future of what's going to happen as a result of what I'm doing. And that's all based on what I did, what I learned in my experience. But it was also based on think big and think in futures. So the raw materials. So again, I would go out and again, I've given, there's many ways you can do this, but just develop relationships with people. Develop, hi, how are you? Talk to your neighbor. Hi, how are you? I mean, I talked to my neighbor for years and finally asked him to do something. Um, I remember this was kind of funny. Um, One of my story of building this business was based on a character by the name of J.R. Ewing from a TV series called Dallas. And JR was my mentor. I would say this, and I had this whole spiel about him being my mentor and watching the show, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was enamored by what he was doing, and that would open up my speech when I was talking on stage or talking in audiences or groups across the country and around the world. So we were in Los Angeles in Anaheim, and we had a big Team Diamond event, and there was a distributor who happened to live next to Larry Hagman. And he goes and he tells Larry Hagman that about my story. So I'm at this event. It's Saturday morning. I get a ring from the front desk. Dave, there's a package down here for you. Oh, okay, great. I go down in the package and I open it up, and here's a signed picture from Larry Hagman. All the best, Dave. And so you never know who your neighbor is, and you never know the connection of what's going to happen in the stories that get told. And you've heard the stories, and so it's a cultivation of relationships that builds this business. So we talk about this in the sense of your warm market. Why do we want to go with warm market? Was the other thing that Robert said with all the people he's working with, they're all still working in their warm market. Why? Because those are cultivated relationships that people know and understand. So it's a little bit different in see again, I got approached the other day on a deal. What I've learned to do when I get approached on deals is look. In other words, when I get people, how many people, okay, just quickly raise your hand. How many get pitched 3 or 4 times a week on deals and so buying this and buying that all day, And how many times do you just hang up and go click and I'm not interested? So here I'm going to give you, reverse that. Start talking to them. You don't have to buy from them, but learn. So I now talk to everybody because I want to see how they're approaching me. What are they saying? How are they acting? How are they communicating? How are they developing a relationship? So on and so forth. And I have turned those people into prospects in my career because that's something I did. I listened to what they were and I say, man, I learned, okay, there was a gal and she would go to malls and she would watch women communicating. Now, women are great communicators. Just there you are, more so than men. And you can talk a blue streak and you can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. So what she did was she went to the malls and watched that kind of stuff going on. And when the two separated from talking, she went over to the one that she felt was the big talker and said, man, I was watching you communicate. I mean, you're unbelievable. Admiration. Admiration will get you everywhere. Admiration will get you everywhere in prospecting. So that's what she did. And she developed relationships and she found six people that would go silver and she went platinum, all at the mall. And the reason she did that because she was prospecting and cultivating and creating relationships. Now, you all have services in your area. Just go start talking to them. Say, make okay. So I like tonight is no tonight's Thursday. Tuesday's Taco Tuesday. And I have this little strip mall near my home where I go after I get off the ferry and I go home and I drop by and I go this. I own that store now. Now, I don't own it physically or monetarily. I own it because the guy had a little service bell, and you go ding, 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 ding. And so I would go in there and hit the service bell, ding, 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 service. Now I walk in there, he's running to that bell because he wants to beat me to the service, and the whole staff all know me. And so some of the other patrons know that I'm coming in, I'm going to ring the bell, and they sit there and ring the bell, service, service, service. And we have a ball with this thing. And I've developed this incredible relationship with this person over the past few months because I didn't go there before. And it was just all based on now. The next question is if I wanted to sit down and talk with him about building the business, do you think it would be easy? Absolutely, it'd be a piece of cake. So what Robert said in what was really important about how his group is operating and what they're doing is they're cultivating and developing relationships with the people that they know based on the big story. And the big story is what he's talking about, or what Michael's talking about, or what you're talking about, or what I talk about, or whatever you created, and where you want to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And it's a mission, and it's got to align with your purpose. Now, here's the other thing I'm going to say. Now, this is not to scare you, but it's, you got to talk to a lot of people to find those that are going to resonate with you. That's all. And it's your willingness. It's your willingness that's most important. It's your enthusiasm. It's your knowledge. It's your control of the communication. Start, change, and stop. And so it all boils down to you. So you either going to make yourself or you're going to break yourself. That's up to you. But the process is the same. And so in that area, part of you being the CEO and part of you running your business is you have to direct the traffic. And when we did the admin skill, you had the goal and you got to name that goal. And it's got to be economic in the sense of because in business, that's all the business understands is the economics. It doesn't understand excitement or emotion because a business is a thing. It only understands numbers. And at the end of the month, the numbers that it has to understand is can it pay the bills? And the game is, does it make more than you spend? So the idea is you can control its growth by understanding what makes it grow. But you have your goal, and then the purpose is the drive. It's the purpose of why you're doing this in the first place. And again, it doesn't have to be altruistic. It can be very simple like mine was, to put food on the table, take care of my family. That's it. This looked like a great deal. It looked like very ethical, responsible, moral. It wasn't cheating people. There was a great exchange. We talked about exchange and how you create a product and exchange and get what you want to get. And it seemed purposeful and it seemed opportunistic because everybody I talked to had no idea what it was. So that made a whole bunch of sense. And at the same time, they were saying people had a hard time sleep. Well, it's even worse now. Stress is even higher. So there's your purpose. There's the drive. And then again, policy is the next thing. And that's the rules that, what makes it do what makes it work, not what doesn't make it work. Sitting around on your couch doesn't make it work. So that's one of those things that you should go get rid of. And again, if you're trying to build the business, if you're not talking, again, if you're not talking to people, that's the raw material that you need to come in the front door all the time, raw material. You got to figure out and just use this, thing and start thinking about that. But then we get down to after we've got the policy, the plan is to get to a diamond, royal diamond, where we want to get the program or the step-by-step things that there's so many different things to watch and learn about how to do that. Then there's the projects you got to do. And then there's the orders. See, the orders are what you tell yourself or your downline what to, and that's very important. So fill up the pipeline. I use that analogy. It's like the oil business is because they have these pipelines and oil goes through one end to the factory and then they turn it into gasoline and plastic and all the other things that they produce. And you got to fill that pipeline. Now, here's what's important to understand. Think big and think in futures. So let's say you start off, okay, I'm going to find one new person to talk to every day. At the end of 1 year, you've got 365 potential people to talk to. We ignore circumstance. So again, part of your business is to develop that, that machine that in the future is going to be valuable to what you want to do. And if you look at your whole business, and again, when I look back at how I was taught how to build depth in every leg. So in other words, why would I build one leg, build it completely deep below and not get paid on it until the future? Well, let me tell you, because it gave me the story to do the second one. The second one was twice as fast. The third one was three times as fast. And why was that so? Is because I had the confidence to tell the story to somebody brand new, and it wasn't BS. It was the truth. See, once you got, again, if you were all making $10,000 a month, and you had an organization with one leg that was 25 silvers deep and was producing the amount of money that you needed to do to make that kind of money, 300,000 points, 10,000 a month. How easy would it go talk to somebody brand new about this business? Piece of cake. You wouldn't hesitate. You would get it. Hey, John, let me talk. Let's talk here. Let me show you what I can do for you. I got this guy, da 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 da. I mean, confidence plus because you did it, but it's still you. What's the difference? See, you got rid of the considerations why you think you can't. So you want to really develop those relationships and you really want to build up your resources all along the line. And so in the book Vested Interest, I had these different factories. And each factory did something different. Each building of the factories, there was one big factory with a bunch of different buildings. But when I looked at that analogy and I started to play around with this thing, it and everything else that I saw and saw how it worked, it's all the same stuff, just different pieces, different, different areas, different terminals. And let's look at a restaurant. So a restaurant needs what raw materials does it need to have? It needs the ingredients to cook dinners, breakfast, lunch, whatever it does. And depending on the audience, depending on the menu, depending on the location, who knows what they have to have. And so and that's why the success failure rate of restaurants huge. They fail more than they're successful. So no wonder why is there's so many chips and plates that they're spinning, whereas you got one. Really, is finding people that have a need to make some money, and that's got to be the catalyst. The other things will come as a secondary aspect. So today's lesson is simply, start really understanding the various aspects of your business, load up your pipeline, get to know people, start developing your relationships, but develop them with the idea of the future in mind. If you're going to be here this year or next year or the year after, who knows what's going to happen in 2 years from now, and who knows how many people you might like to be able to talk to and say, "Hey, I got this deal, I got this going on, this is happening, blah, blah, blah." And then you develop your story. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for tonight.
It's all good. Good stuff.
Yes, Jenny. Thank.
I've been rousting up some old relationships. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No,
People I haven't talked to in a while. So
yeah, that's always a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, again, that's how I got involved. The guy that got me involved, I had it was about 6 years prior that I was did business with him. Yeah, Leo.
Great training, Dave, tonight, and just like to say thank you to four people in my group on this call. Imagine for that. Isabel, Patricia, and another Isabel and Danielle. Thank you. So see you next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll record this and post it. It'll be up on the weekend.